Good evening. It is April 7th, 2020 at 4:00 p.m. I'd like to call to order the Town of Sutton Select Board meeting. Tonight we are meeting remotely, and I'll start by sort of reading a preamble about that. First of all, permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. So when I call out each of the members' names, if you will just respond. And I am David Hall, Chair. So Wendy Mead, Vice Chair.
Present.
Wendy, we've got Jesse Lemanik is the clerk.
I'm here.
Jonathan Anderson is member.
Here.
Jeff Bannon also a member.
Here.
We also have Jim Smith, Town Manager.
Here.
And Tim Harrison, Town Accountant, is in the meeting.
Here.
We also have Deb Jakes, who is our secretary for the meeting. Who doesn't want to be heard? This open meeting is conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's orders suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. That's part of the technology we're still working on. The order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allow public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with deliberations of the meeting. This meeting is live over the be recorded, published on YouTube and other sources that you can normally view our access. That we can do it. This meeting will not feature public comment. We really have that at this point. For this meeting, we're meeting via Zoom. Please note that this meeting is being recorded, as I just said. So accordingly, please be aware that everybody can see you, and take care not to screen share your computers for the participants. Because anything that you post can be seen. I think all supporting materials, so basically the agenda of this meeting has been posted according to the proper public posting rules. And we are now turning to the agenda, and I will screen share the agenda. Everybody see that?
Yes.
So our agenda basically is to discuss moving the May town meeting and the town election to June, a budget update, a town manager's update, and then just an adjournment. And so we will follow sort of our proper procedure in terms of identification of individuals, so as to kind of, due to the limitations of an electronic meeting, just sort of be able to control the meeting in a way that allows people to kind of follow what we're doing. So our first meeting item is to discuss moving the May town meeting and the town election to June, and I'll turn it over to Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With the governor's state of emergency order, town hall is closed until May 4th. We are operating on a skeleton staff. There are a few people that come and go from town hall to do essential business, making sure the bills are being processed, payroll is being done. The Board of Health is in here on a regular basis, and they also spend a lot of time down at the schools and the nursing suite down at the high school. But and the highway department is also operating on a skeleton staff, 3 individuals each day. So they only have so many vehicles to go out on the road and to sweep the streets or fill potholes, et cetera. So we are, and well. So we are operating, be it on a limited staff. With that being said, all of the public hearings have been canceled at this point in time. The Planning Board and Conservation had some public hearings scheduled, but with the recent legislation that I believe was signed by the governor on Saturday, all of those meetings are now allowed to delay action on any of the public hearings until, I believe it's 45 days after the state of emergency is lifted. So that gives a little bit of latitude around that time frame, and now we can relax and just focus on what needs to get done. Another issue that won't get addressed is the Finance Committee public hearings that were originally advertised to take place in late March and April. I have been in touch with Pat Morris, the chairperson, and he is aware of this. So at this point, it seems unlikely, if not at all, that the possibility of holding town meeting on May 11th. I think it's appropriate to have Finance Committee public hearings prior to that event, so the public is aware of what's going on with the budget, as well as all the different items, the sewer project and the purchase of land up at Waters Farm, and on all the Planning Board articles. What I want to have a general discussion about is postponing May town meeting till some point in June. I'm looking at June 15th and June 22nd, both Monday nights. So as a tentative, we'll have to see what the climate is at that point in time, or 30 days before that point in time. But I am selecting a date, and then we can post things as we get closer. There is a position open in the Housing Authority, and there's also a position open as in the Library Trustees. Both of those individuals haven't finally submitted papers because of the difficulty of getting signatures and so forth, but they are willing to be written in, and that should take care of that issue. But again, it's up to the board, but I'm recommending at some point in June for both of those. And then we'll have to wait and see maybe a month before to see if things are moving forward or not.
So Jim, before I turn it over to the board, one question I have is, do you have any issue, given that everything's so compressed in time, with trying to move these things, do you have an issue with the date of the election, whenever that gets determined to be, perhaps potentially being on the same night as, say, a FinCom public hearing or anything like that?
No, at this point, if anything, we've learned to be flexible. And I have no problem with whatever's going on that election day. For one, it's not a contested election. It's, we've got two selectmen running unopposed, select person candidates, and two other individuals that are running for a vacant seat. So I don't see any issue with that.
All right, if it's all the same to the board, maybe we should take them as separate issues. But I'll tell you what, we'll start with Jesse, and if you're okay with that, that's fine. If there's things you want to roll into it, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I really don't have any significant questions other than timetables. Is there anything in terms of requirement vis-a-vis posting town meeting or the election that may?
Yeah, I mean, the board is going to have to vote on the warrant when it's before you. And it needs to be posted 7 days before the actual meeting, which gives a couple weeks before that to know that I'd like to present a draft warrant and a final warrant, but even if that's compressed, it's 2 or 3 weeks before the actual meeting takes place. And Dave and I have discussed, moving forward with just the essential items to continue the operations of Town Hall, the budget, the capital plan, and the enterprise funds. And nothing contentious. We really don't want to draw a large crowd to town meeting for obvious reasons. But there are pros and cons behind that as well. So I just want to throw that up.
Yeah, no, I think that kind of makes sense because obviously we don't know what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks. And while we hope that this pandemic begins to recede, obviously I'm sure we're going to still have to maintain some level of social distancing, at least for the foreseeable future. So I definitely agree with that last point that you made, Jim, about reducing any potential contentious issues till a time when we think going forward it's safe. So
Right.
I would definitely be supportive of a compacted town meeting in that regard.
Thank you.
But other than that, I really don't have any questions because it seems pretty straightforward to me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Jesse. Wendy?
Yeah, just to echo Jesse's sentiments, I think it's a pretty well thought out plan moving forward. And regardless of that, I don't think we have much of any option to do otherwise. So I'm completely on board with that schedule.
Okay, Jonathan?
Yeah, I'm in the same mindset as Jesse and Wendy. This makes sense. We don't really have much of a choice. I think the only selection of the dates is just should consider the amount of public hearings that need to happen beforehand. That's really my only concern, particularly with the town meeting. But I also agree to reduce to the essentials, just to keep it simple and reduce the need for people to go. Reduce the need for a large crowd to gather. So I think that makes sense. And also reduces the complexity of the public hearings that will happen beforehand as well.
That's true.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually.
Yeah.
Jeff? Thank you, Jonathan.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm in favor of this as well. I think it makes sense. I guess the only question I have is if I guess I understand the issues, the carryover issues with the budget, but are there any issues with carryovers of elected positions, or do we have waivers for those positions as well?
What do you mean by carryovers, Jeff?
Well, if we extend beyond the fiscal year.
Yeah, if we extend beyond the fiscal year, then we're going to have to operate on 1/12 of our budget, which isn't undoable. But certainly there will be no increases in various departments that they've requested. Certainly pay increases, just operating on one of their actual 2020 budget. So no issues with that. And as long as the select persons don't mind continuing carrying over, I don't think there's any issue with that either.
Do they still get the good seats?
It's up to you guys.
That's all I had. Thanks.
And I assume, Jim, that the decision to carry over, so presume for a moment that June turns out to just not be doable. So I would presume in that case, we would get back together, vote to move it out, and then just vote again to adopt that carryover budget.
To do what?
To adopt like the carryover budget.
Yeah, the 1/12. Yeah.
No. And for any viewers, the governor has and the legislature has voted a plan to do exactly that, to allow us to do exactly that. So they've kind of laid out what those rules would be pretty well.
Yeah, just to comment on that, the rules existed for cities as well as regional school districts, but not for towns. But the legislation has addressed that issue, and now all towns adopt a 1/12 budget if they're not able to adopt a fiscal budget prior to the end of the fiscal year.
Okay. Well, it seems, my point of view would be that moving into the 22nd, moving town meeting to the 22nd is the logical thing to do. Just to give us as much time as we buy, essentially, because there's still date requirements that exist for the vote to be taken, and then for the, hopefully the final draft of the warrant, whatever it turns out to be, to get to us. So the point is, I think there remains some amount of time requirements necessary in advance of the meeting. So at least that would be my thought, pushing it back as far as we can, which kind of makes sense.
Would you be in favor of, assuming the 22nd works for June 22nd works for the town meeting, like the town election on the 23rd or the 30th, which is a Tuesday, both Tuesdays? Either one works.
All things being equal, I don't really have any reason not to think that. Jesse, any comments about that?
No, whatever would make it easier. Because obviously we want to kind of wrap things up before the end of the fiscal year. So if we could get both town meeting and the election in the same week, as to your point earlier, Jim, none of the races are contested. So I'm sure turnout will be less than overwhelming, which is unfortunate. But if we can get it done back to back, so long as the staff in town hall feels comfortable with getting it done, then I would be in favor of that decision.
Okay.
I think it's a logical answer to the situation, so I take no issue with that whatsoever.
John?
I'm fine with that as well.
And Jeff?
I'm fine with that.
So why don't we do the 23rd?
Okay.
And that gives time after the vote to kind of manage whatever has to happen for the rest.
Right.
And then what about location for the election?
Well,
That off?
yeah, let's defer that to Laura. She's got this down pretty well, and discussions about combining all the precincts up at the high school. If school may be over on the 22nd, and then we just have, maybe the middle school gym and the Ramasco gym, and try to create enough separation between those, and we have all three precincts up here for this one time. So it's something we've discussed, but we haven't come up with any definitive conclusions. So we'll work on that and get back to you if that's okay.
Sure. And is she also considering a shorter day, voting day?
That is, we're considering that, yes. I don't know that there's any reason to have the full 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. election for uncontested races. The time to submit the papers was today at 4 o'clock. And we didn't receive any. So right now we have the current situation, and there's nobody's running opposed. So I would be supportive of a shorter time frame for the election.
Yeah. And then, in the midst of all that, you think about the poll workers and everything else. So I think that's a really good idea if we can do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we need a vote for this? Oh, I'm sorry. I have one other question, Jim.
Sure.
So how do we anticipate communication about this? So, we've had a meeting scheduled and an election scheduled. So we need to get the word out that those things are being postponed.
Well, your trusty communications staff, which are participating on this call, will be right on getting the word out via Facebook, via the town's website, via the cable channels, and pretty much inundating us with this information. I'm assuming it'll be posted to the Sutton site, and word will get out relatively quickly. And we'll do whatever we need to do to get the word out.
I think the stats indicate that like 70 or 80% of the people in town watch our meetings. So
God help us.
All right, so do we need a vote for this?
I would prefer one, yes.
So,
All right.
Jesse, why don't you take the election separate from, so maybe the town meeting first, is that?
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that the town of Sutton holds its annual spring town meeting on June 22nd, 2020.
And so I'll make a roll call vote. So David Hall, aye.
We get a second first.
Sorry, thank you. Go ahead.
Second.
Thank you, Jonathan. David Hall, aye.
Jesse
Wendy Mead,
Lemanik, aye.
Wendy,
Yes, Wendy Mead, aye.
Jonathan,
Jonathan Anderson, aye.
and Jeff.
Jeff Bannon, aye.
That passes 5-0. Jesse, you want to just go ahead and take the election as well?
Sure, absolutely. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we hold the annual municipal election for the town of Sutton on June 23rd, 2020.
Second,
Second.
Thank you, Jonathan. David Hall, aye.
Jesse Lemanik, aye.
Wendy Mead, aye.
Jonathan Anderson, aye.
Jeff Bannon, aye.
All right, that also passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Next up on our agenda then is a budget update.
So before I get there, Mr. Chairman, I'm under the assumption that we will just consider the essential items for the town meeting, meaning the enterprise funds, the budget and the capital plan, and everything else is put on hold until the climate is ready, either fall town meeting at the latest, maybe, or even a special town meeting at some point after July. Is that correct?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I do think that's a good idea. I think Jonathan's point is the best. I think there's just fewer things to consider in public hearings and things like that to prep for this meeting.
Yeah.
So it just makes the administration of the whole thing easier. The idea that some things are more important than others is a little foreign to me. So I know that we have a lot of, we often have little discussion about the budget items in our meetings, and we would anticipate that some of the other things that were on the agenda this year would be more likely to be kind of items of interest around town.
Yeah.
But that, I still have a hard time saying the budget's not an important budget agenda item that people would want to care about and have input into. So that I struggle with that a little bit, but overall, I still think the idea that we would have a stripped down version of the meeting makes sense. Jesse, what do you think?
Oh, I shut the video off. Oh, what am I doing? There we go. All right, am I on? No, there we go.
No.
Sorry, it's fingers with the iPad. Yeah, no, I agree. I think Jonathan's point earlier was spot on. Anything that we can do to compact the process will, I think, take a little less stress off, allow us to focus on what's mostly important, and that obviously is keeping the town in operation. And it will make less pressure when town meeting comes around. So budgetary items, I think that will ease the process, and we can deal with everything else down the road.
Yeah. Wendy?
Yeah, I agree that it means, but I just think we have to slim down the process at this point and, look at everything as a big global picture later on.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I agree with that as well. And I also too, are there going to be any budgetary impacts based on revenue issues that could be coming up based on the economic climate we're in as well? So that could be information as we get further down the road that we can make some assessments as to the direction we need to take some of the more controversial items.
Yeah, we might hear about that.
Not controversial, but more complex items.
Yeah. Okay. Jeff?
I think it should be slimmed down as well. I think that's a good idea. And maybe when we consider whether we're going to have a special town meeting or the fall town meeting, maybe we can roll those all into one, so that if we do have a special town meeting, maybe we can forego the fall town meeting.
Makes sense.
So Jeff, you kind of cut out.
Sorry?
Did he cut out for everybody else?
No.
Okay.
No.
It was just me. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
So my question is, what would be the trigger for us to, to determine whether or not we could continue to hold this meeting even in June?
From my perspective, I would say that, one, we need the governor to make it clear to us that everything's open for business. And that on May 4th, if he continues to say that we're not out of the woods, and I would prefer to go with the stay-at-home order with only essential employees reporting, that would probably put a bit of a damper on this, depending upon that time frame. If things look better towards the end of May, then we could get a quick maybe two finance committee meetings in night after night, and then be ready to go. But to me, I think we need some, feedback from the state on realizing where we are at as a community. We won't be back to normal, I think, until probably some point months down the line. But, if we feel that it's appropriate to hold a limited June, then just my thoughts.
Okay. Before we move on, anybody else have any other comments, questions? Okay, great. Thank you, Jim. So let's move on to the budget update.
Okay. Obviously the budget is balanced at this point, or let me say was balanced. It's based upon the governor's state aid number. We are, at this point in time, we are not preparing for cuts in state aid in the FY 2020 budget. There are approximately 3 months left in this fiscal year, which is 2020. And the state has $3.5 billion in their stabilization account. And everything I've read and people I've talked to feel like that we will be okay this year. However, next year, FY 21 is a totally different story. The state is talking about reconvening the consensus revenue group, which originally convened in, I think, October or early November, to essentially lay out what their forecast was for the upcoming fiscal year. So that group would reconvene probably in May at some point in time and come out with a new consensus. And obviously the governor has said that he will give us the percentage of growth that the budget is growing. But if the budget is decreasing due to lack of revenue coming into the state, then we could face state aid cuts. And I've been in constant contact with Ted Friend this morning and Tim today as well. And we've been discussing this as an option. If the state level funds state aid, then we're fine. I mean, the 30 to 40,000 that the school gets in Chapter 70 money and the 20,000 we get in unrestricted general aid money, it's a small amount of money. It'll affect the big cities a lot harder than it'll affect us, and that's why we budget conservatively, as we've discussed in the past. But we don't know if they cut state aid. Let's say 3%. I believe we'll still be able to handle that. We did talk in our department head meeting this morning about potentially freezing positions as of the new fiscal year. At this point in time, we're not freezing expenditures in the 2020 budget. The thought is that if we froze expenditures and we got, essentially all that does is build up our free cash position at year end. And our free cash position is very healthy. As the board is aware, we had almost $3 million certified in last July. And, we're probably rolling forward maybe 1.2 million into free cash for FY 21. So that's our starting point. So I think additional free cash is great, but it's not something that we should stop spending, money that right now is generally going for necessary purchases, if anything. So that's my thought on this. The federal government also passed the CARE Act, as the board is well aware of. They did say that they're going to provide some stimulus money to state and local governments. I don't know what that looks like. I'm working with my MMA and the managers group to figure out what that's going to look like and what types of monies are coming in, if anything. But we will see a reduction in local receipts. We always talked about motor vehicle excise as the largest local receipt. People generally stop buying vehicles during a slowdown. Now, if this is a very quick slowdown and it's a 6 months versus, a year and a half, then that's a different thought. Meals and excise, meals tax and hotel tax. We received roughly $160,000 in that line item in local receipts. That could come down significantly because people are not going out to eat, and we will suffer a little bit. But again, that is why we've budgeted consistently, conservatively over the years, and I think that's the right way to do it. And obviously, I think it'll work well for us at this point in time.
So Jim, the revenue group that the governor is reconvening, when is that happening? And is that that will affect this year's numbers before town meeting?
We may get some indication on that. I did speak with Joe McKenna, and he didn't think so, but the Beacon has published a little bit of information on that, but they didn't say the date when that revenue consensus group was reconvening. So I'm assuming at some point in May, but what I'll do is I will forward that information to the board as a group, just to let you know what is going on and when it's happening.
Okay. I'm going to open it up to the board then. Unless, Tim, you have any comments?
No, the only thing I would say is, we usually end up revoting the budget at the October town meeting anyway. So, hopefully by October, we'll have an indication of what the state budget's going to look like, and we'll address it then.
Okay.
I think, I agree with Jim. We have the reserves, we have conservative local receipts budgeted. A 3% cut won't devastate us. We'll be able to ride that out, no problem.
Okay, great. Jesse.
Yeah, I don't really have much to say other than thank you, Jim and Tim. I appreciate the update. Obviously, I think we strive hard to maintain transparency with the budget. And I'm sure the 70 to 80% of residents who are tuning in to this meeting now as we speak definitely appreciate that, in these dire times that we're maintaining our consistency in that regard. But in all seriousness, I appreciate the fact that we're just rolling with the punches. We're going to see how things play out, and we do have the means to adjust things going forward. So I think we're in a good place.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wendy.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think it speaks volumes to the way Tim and Jim have conservatively handled our finances in the recent years. So I appreciate it. I think we're in a relatively good spot compared to some other communities. So thank you both. That's all I have.
Great. I would agree. Thank you, Wendy. Jonathan.
I agree. I think this is something that I've mentioned on multiple times, that just how important it is that we manage the budget conservatively, and the fact that's happened. And you can never predict something like this. This just came out of the blue and shut the entire economy down. And so the fact that we have these reserves and the impact for at least this year will be relatively low. And this is just a testament to that conservatism in managing the budget. So I really just appreciate both Jim for managing it this way, because it's in our lifetime. So we've hit that event. So I just feel grateful for the town that it's not going to send us into a tailspin, that we'll build them to maintain it for at least the near term anyway. So
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Jeff?
100% agreement with everything that's been said. I think, you know, we have budgeted conservatively, and Jim and Tim have, you know, for the last 10, 12 years, whatever it's been, have run the town very conservatively. So I'm in 100% agreement with that. And we'll see what happens. You know, I think we have the ability to do it, to deal with it, and hopefully it doesn't get much worse than we think.
Thank you. And I guess the only question I have is, you know, if the indicators along the way suggest that, you know, whether it's local receipts or whether you think the prospects going forward from the state suggest to see low revenues or potentially even mid-year cuts, do you have the ability or the willingness to sort of shift your spending philosophy midstream and throttle back your spending at that point, even though the budget allows you to spend?
Yeah, you know, part of the department head meeting this morning is the issue was brought up about holding back hiring a position. We have a position that's open right now, and you know, we're considering holding off on hiring that position just for the moment. You know, the challenge is safety position. That's a police officer's position. So we've done it in the past. We froze sergeants' positions. We froze every position in town hall during the 2010, 11, 12 frame. So this situation, as is the school department. And I believe we will be able to do that, depending and get back to normal.
And then just to be clear, if we find ourselves at the 1/12 budget, we have the authority to hire, budget authority.
Well, the funds are there in the FY 2020, but to hire the chief will probably have a surplus in his salary account because we haven't been able to hire all of the point in time. So, you know,
I see. Okay.
we do.
Okay. Awesome. Any other questions, discussion? Seeing nothing. So there's no action required there. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it. So I think we're on to a town manager's update.
Thank you, Mr.
Chairman,
Chairman.
I'm sorry. This is Wendy Me. Could I just interject for 1 second?
Please.
I apologize, Jim. I have a relatively minor, but an emergency I need to go take care of. So I apologize to you all greatly. Deb, if you could just note that I left the meeting prematurely, I would appreciate it.
Thank you.
Not a problem.
Thank you. Sorry.
Nope. Take care. Okay, Jim, back to you.
Okay. You know, item number 1 on my update is just to recognize the way that the town has been operating. We're dealing with some wonderful partnerships that have just come in at this point in time, and it's great to experience the way we've been working together. You know, the Board of Health has been doing yeoman's work pretty much 7 days a week. Both Cheryl and Judy Bader and so I you know, they have to report all a lot of work to be done. They also have to follow up with all the cases. So real grind for them. And I just want to throw out some appreciation to them for all their hard work. they've just been doing a wonderful job. Police, fire, and EMS is going wonderful. They've all been working hard. You know, it's great to see the partnership. You know, the EMS MedStar went down to the police department and gave them all, provided some training on the COVID situation, provided them all with go bags, which, you know, in any emergency situation, they have now the PPE, the personal protective equipment that they can respond to any type of scene. And that was just a great effort by MedStar to volunteer to do that. You know, and I like to throw a shout out to Paul Maynard. He's been working really hard behind the scenes with MEMA and FEMA to get any additional personal protective equipment and grants from them as well, which, you know, Matt Belcito has said that he's received a ton of equipment from the National Guard that drives up with a big camouflage truck every week, it seems, or even more frequent than that, and drops off masks and protective shields and gowns and everything else that's necessary. So we're not in any need of that equipment due to the great partnerships that we have developed. And Ted Friend in the school department has been terrific as well, working partnership with them. Ted and I are on the phone on a daily basis. Their custodians come over to town hall and disinfect not only the town hall, but also the EMT sleeping quarters, the fire department, the police station's being disinfected by their custodian. And so it's great to see during, you know, times of struggle that everybody pitches in and works together as one. And it's just a refreshing sight to see. On that, we did have a conference call with the school department, the superintendent, as well as the business manager, and Tim Harrison and I participated in that. We were discussing the cafeteria workers and the after-school workers. They are both revolving fund driven accounts where people pay into it to receive the service, either after school or cafeteria. They pay in to purchase meals, and the people are paid out of these revolving funds. And, you know, we were discussing whether to furlough these employees or whether to keep them on our payroll. After some significant discussion, we decided to continue them on our payroll and to draw down on the revolving funds. We believe there's enough money in these accounts to pay them through 2021, the end of next fiscal year. And if the board is supportive of this, then we will, if there is a small shortage, then we will request a transfer at next May annual town meeting to transfer some money from free cash over to either one of those revolving funds to make them whole. But I thought it was the right decision rather than putting people on the unemployment line. You know, it's a disruption. And I think whatever we can do to retain our employees during this time is a positive situation. So that's that. The Beehive property is gone, as we all are aware of at this point in time. You know, I would like to thank the select board that has kept this on the top of their agenda for a number of years. And as well as Cheryl Lewinsky and the Attorney General for really bird dogging this and making sure these actions got addressed. It's gone now, and it is a sort of a bittersweet story, but in the end, I think it's best for this community and removes what has been an eyesore for as long as I've been here and longer than that. So hopefully we see some development of that in a town sensitive way. The last item I'd like to address is healthcare. We've been talking about that internally for some period of time. We did finally sign a contract with Fallon and have agreed to a 1% increase in our health care. Obviously, we've had various ruminations of this, and at one point it was a double-digit increase, 15%, got it down to 8% with some deductibles, and through some creative thinking, work of our HR person, Erin Shinapi, we're able to get it down to 1% and really adjusted our health reimbursement account as well as our HSA account. So we've increased the deductibles, and you'll see an increase in the HRA, health reimbursement account, and the HSA, health savings account for matching, but we still save significant amount of money over the original plan. And just to put this in perspective, we did get a quote from Maya just to see if this was competitive, and they quoted us at 25 to 30% for the same type of plan. And so, clearly Fallon wasn't playing games with us, and I just want to thank Erin and everybody else that worked on this plan, as well as the IAC and the unions and the employees, because this is a plan design change, which, as you know, shifts more of the burden onto the employees. And so I'd like to thank them for agreeing to this and accepting it, because it's a little bit of a challenge to adjust to. So that's all I have for updates, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Jim. Jesse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim, thank you for the update. Definitely appreciate it. And I definitely think it's appropriate that you essentially gave recognition to everyone who is working together as a team. But I would like to add one person's name to the list, if I may, and that, of course, is yours. Because as we all know, that a team functions best when it has strong leadership. And I'm sure you are putting in overtime, ensuring that the needs of your staff and all of the town employees are met in a way that's both fair to the residents as well as the staff members. So thank you for all the effort that you've put in.
Thank you.
I would like to ask one quick question about Cheryl.
Sure.
I know that she does work contractually with other towns.
Yes.
Has she seen an increased workload as a result of the mutual agreements that we've established with those 9 or 10 other communities?
The answer is yes. To some extent, she's also working with Charlton, who is pursuing a CMRPC regional grant. And they have been working together, and we will get a significant amount of that money to reimburse any expenses that we have. The nurses that are working with us from the school, they're currently being paid by the school department. So there's really no additional cost with that. Any extra time, overtime, weekends, et cetera, they will be reimbursed for through this grant. So when this is all said and done, we'll probably have to take a look at these IMAs and whether they are working for us or not. But I would like to defer that question until we're out of this situation and out of the woods. But it is a legitimate question, and it's worth considering when the time is right.
Yep. Thank you. I appreciate the fact that we'll give it consideration again when the time is appropriate.
Yeah.
And while I'm at it, I'd also like to thank the chiefs and all of the department heads as well, because I'm sure, just as you've been putting in overtime, I'm sure they're making sure that their staffs or needs are taken care of. So we cannot forget, obviously, Chief Toll and Chief Belcito and everybody else that are bending over backwards to make sure that the services that are vital to our community are maintained to the best of our ability under these circumstances. As far as the second item goes, yeah, if there's money in the budget to prevent the furlough of the staff members, I would be in favor of that. So I don't know if we need to take a vote at some point, but whatever you decide to do, Jim, I'm okay with it.
Okay.
Beehive, yeah, I drove through town the other day. It was definitely different. I don't know if it's pleasant, but it's a change, and it's a change that is unfortunate, but it was necessary. So hopefully we can at least, or at least BP can make that area at least look somewhat presentable before they decide how they're gonna go forward. And last but not least, thanks to Erin. because obviously, you know, every single year that I've been on the board, the issue of healthcare is always concerned. Some years we've been lucky, other years not so lucky. And I think this goes to your vision in promoting her to HR director, the fact that she had time to dig a little deeper and ultimately bring about tremendous savings. And thank you to all the staff members and the unions who hopefully will agree to support this program going forward. So great job, Jim. Great job, Tim. And thank you to all the department heads for all that you do on a daily basis.
Thank you.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. That was good. Jonathan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I want to echo a lot of what Jesse said. I think, you know, how the town has come together and all the employees have all just really just gone way up above and beyond to deal with the situation that we're in. You know, Cheryl and, you know, Judy, you know, are working, you know, around the clock to deal with this situation and keep the town abreast of what's going on and dealing with all the, I'm sure, countless meetings that they have to go to.
Yeah.
One question I have there is, do we need to consider like temporary staff to help out in any way, or administration staff to kind of offload so that they're not burning out over this period?
Yeah, we are looking at hiring additional nurses, school nurses generally, from other communities. And most of those communities are paying their nurses to stay at home. So if they volunteer for this duty, then they can come in and we'll put them to work. Some in clerical, but most of them in, you know, healthcare roles. And, you know, the fortunate part is, you know, our costs will be fairly limited because they are on the payroll for some town. But we did talk, Cheryl and I talked earlier today about their plan, and right now they've got pretty much all of the nurses suite down at the high school occupied with school nurses, Cheryl, Judy, and some other folks as well. So it's pretty much a full-blown effort at this point, but we will reach out to these other communities to see what resources they have to offer us.
That's good, yeah, because I get concerned with the amount of hours that they're putting in, and you know, just puts them more at risk as well. You know, so I'm just concerned about that. You know, just also want to acknowledge the EMS and you know, going in, helping out our police and making sure that they have the right equipment to be safe. They're getting called, I'm sure they get called out for all kinds of different situations that could put them at risk. So just really grateful for that. I think that's just an incredibly good thing that they did. You know, also to the school, you know, Ted, in trying to adapt to this new world and keeping our kids at least, you know, somewhat engaged and keeping them moving forward. And I'm sure that's going to continue to adapt, but I just wanted to acknowledge that as well. And yeah, so just, you know, everybody is just doing incredibly good work. And it's just, like I said earlier, we're all adapting to this new world and what it looks like for at least now. And as things change, you know, I'm sure we'll have to adapt there as well. So
yeah,
I want to acknowledge that.
Thank you.
And just, you know, leading into the cafeteria employees, I just feel it's really important that if we we can support our, you know, town employees during this time and not put them out onto unemployment, which is, you know, can be a very difficult situation. And of course, unemployment's backed up right now. And so there could be a gap there. So I think anything we can do to support our employees during this time will just take the stress off of them and know that the town has their back during this period of time. Just one less thing to deal with the stress. I know there's private corporations that do that as well. I know of a company, I think Phillips, you know, something that I know, they took a pay cut in order to keep people from getting laid off, you know, so I thought that was, so I think anything we can do to help our employees stay on is just really important. So I fully support that. As far as the Beehive goes, it's very bittersweet. I hate to see any historic building like that go. You know, it goes back a long time, but, you know, to everybody else's point, it just gotten to a point where it was really not going to be feasible to save that building. And it's just unfortunate, but we find ourselves in a situation where it was, there was holes in the roof, and it wasn't going to be long for that building was going to start coming down on its own. So it was absolutely the right thing to do. And then as far as the healthcare goes, I'm really excited about this. I know when you were reporting out, giving us updates on the budget process, and you were talking 15%, and you were trying to figure out how you could get down to even 8%. And the fact that, to Jesse's point, with putting Erin full-time on this, you could put more energy into looking at the different options and coming up with a strategy. And the fact that we're down to 1% is pretty amazing. But I also want to acknowledge too that, we did have to do plan changes, which I hate to see happen, but it's just kind of what the climate is today in dealing with healthcare. It's happening in the private sector as well. I faced that as well myself, having to pay more out of my own pocket for healthcare.
Yeah.
We're all kind of in the same boat on that. So I want to acknowledge that there is impact to town employees, but I also think that, keeping the cost down, especially to 1%, will benefit everybody. So I think I'm really happy with that outcome, because I was expecting a much higher increase. So again, thank you for all your work. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Jeff, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple things, Jim. First of all, thanks very much for recognizing all the people that you did in your update, because there are a lot of people that really pulled together with all the issues we have in town right now, and it really, I think, brings out times like these, kind of bring out the best in the people we have and the people that work for us. Cheryl and Judy, in particular, I can't imagine the amount of work that they have on a daily basis with all this. So, hats off to them. They really have stepped up, and that's great. I think times like this, there's lessons learned, and kind of going back to the budget. These are the times we'll remember when years from now people say, "Why are we budgeting so conservatively?" But it just kind of shows, when we have a budget and you have the municipality and the schools run the way they are, that can absorb these kind of things, these kind of really crazy issues that come up like this. I think that speaks volumes to what you've done, what all the department heads do, and what they're doing at the school. So hats off to and thank yous to all the people that you mentioned. Thank you to you as well for all the hard work you put in, and the teachers as well at school. I know how hard they're working. The principals and the administration there too. It's a new world. So just want to recognize their effort, as well as the students. It's hard for them. I know it's hard for them. I know it's hard for the parents. So. We'll get through it. Let's see. So again, thanks for that. Fully in support of keeping the cafeteria employees and the after school employees on the payroll to the extent we can. Being able to protect their livelihood during times that, this isn't their fault. It's not our fault. It just happens. So I'm 100% in favor of that. And I think it's a good thought. The beehive, I agree, it is bittersweet, but as the years have gone by, honestly, it's becoming more sweet than bitter, because it has been in that state for a very long time. So, so that's good, and I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen there. Healthcare, boy, I'll tell you, that's a huge difference. A 15%, that's a $400,000 plus swing. So. I'm glad that Erin could step right in and make an immediate impact with her efforts in that. And I know you had a lot, and there were a lot of people involved in that. So thank you for that. Plan design changes are tough, but it could have been a lot worse. So that's a good thing. And I guess that is all I had as far as your update. So thanks. Again. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Appreciate it. You know, I'm obviously going to echo the comments made by all of my colleagues regarding the folks around town hall. You know, particularly, I'm happy to see that you mentioned Cheryl and Judy and all of the first responders who literally put their own health on the line as they respond and do their jobs every day. That's a lot to ask of people. Jim, you and I spoke, I don't know, a week or so ago about Cheryl, who's working 7 days a week at this point. So, you know, we certainly appreciate all the efforts that they're making. But, you know, my observation is I'm just not surprised that we know these people well, and we know that's how they are. And so while we're certainly grateful, I'm not surprised that we're grateful. That's we have a great team there. So we certainly appreciate everything that they've done. I'm also glad that you mentioned our old friend Maynard. I was listening to the governor probably a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking about considering some alternative sites where they might put up temporary shelters or temporary hospitals, or like they did with the DCU Center, and all that went into making those decisions. And he was talking about MEMA and FEMA and the kinds of plans that they had in place, and that they had a whole playbook of things that they've already worked out. And they basically just open up the playbook and kind of go through it. And that he was sort of talking about the depth of questions that they go into what determines whether something's an appropriate site. And all I could think of as he was doing that was Maynard, because he's been doing that kind of stuff for a long time, and I've talked to him about those kinds of things, and he's really fascinating to speak with about those things, and the depth that he goes into in preparation for these kind of things. So I've been thinking about Maynard and all that he was up to during this period of time.
Yeah.
So good shout out to him. You know, like everyone else, I'm certainly in favor of continuing to pay our cafeteria and those other school folks as long as we can. You know, it seemed pretty evident to me that what the federal government is trying to tell us through the programs that they put out is keeping people on the payroll is important. And I think we all agree that is the right thing to do. That's good for those people. That's good for the town to keep up those employment relationships and just bring people back next year when we're back and running.
Yeah.
You know, I think everyone said the right thing about the Beehive. You know, it was not just an eyesore; it was truly a safety issue over there. But it certainly was an eyesore as well. You know, how many people have said to us over time, you know, how ugly that thing is, and it's nice to have it gone.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't have much to add to the healthcare thing, other than, as you have already pointed out, and we've talked about this in the past, you know, for the union and for the town employees to step up and agree to really significant changes is really a big thing. It's not just helpful to our budget. It is a big change for these people. And so turning it around and thinking of it not from a budget perspective, but from the people perspective, you know, so we're asking a lot, and they've always been, it's certainly a pocketbook issue to them as well.
Right.
But they've been always been very helpful and understanding of what we're trying to accomplish and why. And so it's just appropriate to recognize that and say thank you to them. So thank you for the update.
Sure.
And I think we're on to correspondence, roundtable, all of that stuff. So Jesse, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have one, and it's a huge thank you to all of the parishioners at St. Mark's Church who managed to, even though Mass has not been held in session, obviously because of the COVID outbreak, but Father Mike DiGeronimo put out a call saying that they wanted to maintain the monthly delivery to the food pantry I went earlier in the week, last week, dropped off the buckets. I really wasn't sure what to expect, but much to my surprise, when I showed up at the church on Monday morning, all the bins were full. So that's just huge. Obviously, with the senior center operating on reduced hours, getting donations to the food pantry with this increased draw because of the circumstance that many of our residents have found themselves on, the demand is there. But the fact that so many people in the community are rising to that call with just sincere charity and with this donations, it's just wonderful. Along that same lines, I'd also like to say a thank you to Taylor Pro, Jasmine at Taylor Pro. I know she made a bunch of cloth masks, and I was able to deliver those down to the senior center as well. And they're currently being used by the Meals on Wheels volunteers. So not only is town hall responding and the town employees responding, so many people are responding in our community. So thank you from me, thank you from Michelle. And obviously the carriage is out in front of the senior center. So if you miss a drop-off point, there's other ways to donate. And if I may, before I pass the mic, as it were, I would also like to thank Pam and Christine. They've been doing a tremendous job with all methods of communication. And I'm learning more just by popping up Facebook that I'm getting from the news. So it's very nice to see. So thank you, Pam. Thank you, Christine. And I can see Debbie down on the bottom, so I might as well thank her as well. So thank you all, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Jess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hey, Jesse, before I move along,
Sure.
you kind of touched on it, but we actually were doing an Instacart shopping thing, where you put your order in and somebody shops for you, and we were shopping for ourselves, but also for the food pantry at the same time. And it occurred to me, would it make sense to just have a separate trip and have the stuff dropped off down there? Or does that put a burden on them, and it'd be better to sort of funnel it through something like the church?
Well, the thing is obviously they're working on reduced hours. They're operating currently 8 in the morning till noontime. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to maximize their availability from the people who draw off the pantry. So if the delivery could get there when they're open, I don't think it would necessarily impact things too much. But I don't know if they necessarily have the ability to hang around, as it were. So if you normally in the community, you make a donation through one of the churches, I know the Congregational Church makes the delivery, or there are collection bins at different points around town, that might be a little more appropriate than having an extra delivery sent down there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Jonathan.
Thank
you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to acknowledge just the community as a whole, the town employees, our first responders, all the nurses and doctors that live in town. I'd also like to acknowledge just, our residents and the things that we don't even know that they're doing to support the community. But I think there's just a lot of great spirit and collaboration going on. And it really kind of just warms my heart to see how we respond when we're in these difficult situations, both as a community and as a nation as well. And I think this is just an unprecedented time that we've never experienced in our lifetimes. And it just makes me happy to see how we respond and support each other during these times. We're not out of the woods yet. We've got a ways to go, but I just think that because of just our spirit, we'll get through it, and we'll learn a lot of lessons, and we'll make those adjustments as we learn them. But I just wanted to acknowledge our community as a whole for just people adhering to the social distancing and staying home as much as possible and only going out when necessary. I think as a whole, the vast majority of people are following those rules. And I think because of that, we'll get through this much faster. So I just really want to acknowledge that as well, and recognize that can bring difficulty and hardship for people. But I think overall it's for the greater good of the community. So I just really appreciate that.
Great, thank you. Jeff.
Well, I'd like to just reiterate everything that Jesse and Jonathan have said, although I'm sure I can't do it as eloquently as they have. But really, it's an unusual time right now, and the town has certainly pulled together. One of the nice things that's happened that I've found is just going out and trying to get some exercise, walking, and just the people that you meet that you haven't seen and talked to for a number of years. It's been kind of nice that way. The community spirit. So that's been if there was an upside, that to me, that's it. Jim, I did have one question though. Is if somebody finds themselves symptomatic, they're obviously going to call their doctor, health provider, or whatever. Does the health department get involved? Do they hear from the health provider, or?
Yeah, these generally come through the PCP. So if somebody is symptomatic, then they generally call their doctor. That doctor may refer them to one of the free testing sites.
Yep.
If obviously they're a public safety official, the Shrewsbury CVS site is closed now, and it's now up in Lowell at the theaters off of 495. So that's the Lowell site. And there's also one down in Foxborough at Gillette Stadium. But, my PCP can order a test if I was symptomatic. So, if you are symptomatic, then you probably want to contact your doctor, and your doctor will refer you to one of the numerous options that are out there for a test.
Okay.
So.
Okay, great. And that's all I have, Dave.
Thank you. Can I just follow up on that? So I guess the part that I didn't hear is at what point does Cheryl get involved? Does she necessarily get involved at all?
Cheryl's on
going on in the community.
Cheryl's on the back end, the after effect, when cases are reported positive. They then contact the local board of health to let them know that somebody tested positive. And she begins to work with that resident and their household to determine their contacts, and really follow up as to who else might be symptomatic. So at that point, it's kind of a searching process where you have to contact with a number of different people to say, you were in contact with somebody that tested positive for COVID, and we just want to make sure you're okay. If not, and follow up with that routine. So that's really the majority of her work, following up on the back end after the individual has been tested and is determined to be positive.
So actually, going back to your update, like Jesse had mentioned, I had written down the IMAs with Cheryl.
Yeah.
And just a concern for every time we had a new one of these agreements come up with the town, I think pretty much everybody on the board had the same question: does she have the time available to handle all that work? And when it was routine kind of work, that was certainly fine, was the answer. But I think this circumstance is certainly not routine. And the question, which I know we'll look into later, is whether how this is working out in terms of her time. But I guess if she's doing that for Sutton, the question is she also doing that for all those other towns in which we have those IMAs?
Yes, she is actually, because a big part of those IMAs is the communicable diseases. In the past, maybe she had one or two TB cases that she'd have to report through the Maven website. Now, obviously, that has blown up nobody could see the coronavirus as an issue when we were entering into all these agreements. So, yeah, it's definitely something to consider at the appropriate time.
Okay. I'm going to sound like everybody else, that my wife and I have been sort of gotten into a habit. I missed it tonight, but of going out for a walk, and it's been really sort of nice. I mean, certainly less traffic as you walk around, but just walking seems to be kind of a common thing that people have taken up maybe in this time. So it is nice to kind of make some contact with with people at a distance. But even at that, when you're walking down the street, people are really good at respecting kind of your space, and everybody's crossing the street and saying hello from across the street. We had a neighbor drop off some cookies, and so we started a little neighborhood recipe swap, she called it, which was kind of fun. So I think maybe as you would expect, but I think the community has pulled together and responding as best as you can in these circumstances. If I could point out one thing, maybe continue to understand what's being asked of us regarding social distancing and kind of do the right thing. But by and large, you do see a lot of that around. So it's just nice to see. And I did speak to Cheryl a little while back. I'm sorry, Michelle a little while back, and she seems to be, pretty happy with the way things are down at the senior center. Obviously, they're not there to do a lot of their programs every day, but their outreach to seniors and particularly Meals on Wheels and that kind of thing has continued to take place. And so, that part in particular, and I think we all worry about our seniors and their ability to reach out to the community. But I think, Michelle feels like she's been able to keep up with that. So glad to hear that.
Yeah, she's been doing a terrific job, and she's actually making the food pantry food available to anybody that has a need during this time. No, you don't have to provide your income or anything like that, but you can just call the senior center and reach out to them, and they will try to provide what's necessary for any individual in town. So all you need to do is produce proof of residence, and it's there for you.
So as Jesse pointed out earlier, it just points to increased need and try to keep that in mind as best you can.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for the update. Any other questions or comments from the board? Then I think at this point I would accept a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second?